Good morning. I got an interesting video today because I've actually prepared some notes. Prepared a little document. It's a really nice day. It's a little cold, but with a coat on and a bit of walking, my blood's up. It's a Saturday. It's about 5:30. As you can hear, the wildlife waking up. So today I want to make a video about fame and the many different sides to fame, the many different trappings of fame, the many different levels to fame. So I prepared here, I don't know how well we can see this, I prepared here a little diagram. I was going to say Venn diagram, but this isn't going to work as a Venn diagram. So I don't know how well you can see. So on the top here we have material. So this is material fame. So this section is for fame where the fame is to do with what the person has produced. So there could be a musician, there could be an artist, I'm talking about a painter, there could be a writer, there could just be a public figure. Whatever they produce, this is material fame. Here I've got type. So it says type there. This section is for type of fame. So this is to do with being a local celebrity, this is to do with being like an MP. So this is this section. So this is the type of fame, and this is the type of fame. The top section is the type of fame you get for what you produce. And in the middle here, which is, we'll get to this at the end, this little sun is what controls all fame. So let's start. So I've written some examples down. I'm just going to go through them with you. So here where it says you, this is the very first stage of fame for material. So you is underground success. So this could be an underground band. This could be somebody they're not amateur, they're talented enough, but their work is just underground. So you don't see their work. There could be a painter who hasn't sold a painting, but they're talented. This is where most artists start, underground. We'll move to here. We have indie. So indie is somebody who is pro, they've made it, they get money, but they're not seen in the mainstream. The work is available, it's there, so it'd be on. So they're successful enough to have a podcast with maybe 60,000 subscribers. They tour as a band. Maybe they're second card of a band. They open for the main headline of a stand-up. So they've made it in the industry, but they're just not as big as the mainstream. This is indie. And we have a little splinter category here, which is indie underground. So there's people what have made it indie, but they're still underground. When we move on, we have mainstream here. So mainstream is just after independent success. So mainstream success is people what are... So we have at the very end here SF, which is super famous. So let's not get mainstream mixed up with super famous, because super famous is something else. Super famous is a whole other kettle of fish. This is everybody in the world, even countries that don't speak the same language as this famous person, their face is recognized. So just below that we have mainstream success. So they're a household name, but they're not a worldwide name. So it could be like a Latin singer where only people from those countries they know this person, but outside their country they're not famous, but they're still a mainstream success. Or they're famous in other little countries but not famous over the whole world. And then we have indie mainstream, which is an interesting category. I think indie mainstream is a category what is the most liked. So it's people what are, I would say, just an example, Jack Black, he's sort of an indie mainstream. He's mainstream because he's a household name, and in some places I'd say super famous, but then I'd say everybody maybe knows the name, but then the things he does is maybe indie, because he's a celebrity who is in mainstream films with people like The Rock, but then he comes down and he does little indie projects like video games and stuff like that. I know you can say video games are mainstream, but that market is kind of indie. And then here, SFO, let me see if I can remember what I wrote notes that. So super famous, old school. So this is somebody who's super famous, but they're old now, so they're starting to fade out. So like maybe Dickens, like everyone knows the name Dickens, but he's there, he's weaving the fabric of writing, but he's not exactly there. So I've got some examples for each of these, just so you understand more what I'm talking about. So for super famous, which is this one, I have Tom Cruise. So Tom Cruise is known worldwide, maybe the biggest, I think he is one of the biggest selling action actors, or biggest selling actors. And he's somebody who's been in independent films, he's been in a Kubrick film, he's been in action films. He is super famous. Other people could be like Donald Trump, I guess the Queen in England. They're so famous, they're referenced in all pop culture, and just by looking at them you understand them, and everybody, it's a frame of reference where everybody can use. That's super famous. Then there's super famous old, so I got Marilyn Monroe for that. Any of those sort of old actors. Marilyn Monroe is the most interesting one I've used. I'm picking these names random, but she's got that film where I've got the name of the actress who plays the woman out of Bond. She plays a version of him, I believe. So she's also extremely famous, and she's also weaving into pop culture. Most people know her name. It's just that in 100 years' time, it's just that Tom Cruise will be more famous right now, and in 100 years' time, the names maybe it will always be there. This is super famous old. It will always be there, but time does go on top of it, and there'll be new people, and people forget. So people, that's the wrong phrase. People don't forget; they always remember, but they just move on to the next best thing. So mainstream here, I have Sarah Silverman. Yeah, again, I'm just picking random. So Sarah Silverman is a mainstream comic. Everybody knows. Well, anybody who's into stand-up knows the name, but she's not super famous to the point where everyone knows her name, but she's still mainstream. So I'm just picking. I picked these randomly. There's no. You could argue which category people go in. I get that. Then I have indie mainstream, which is my favorite category. I think the category where everybody should get. It's just like the Riot. It's like the Three Bears. It's just warm enough. So I got Norm Macdonald for indie mainstream. He's been on mainstream shows, and he's but the stand-up he does is sort of indie. So that it automatically kind of makes it indie mainstream. So he's in the mainstream, but the stand-up he does is kind of a niche. Then we have independent. So for independent, I've got another stand-up. I've got Stuart Lee, who's independent. Nobody really knows his name in the mainstream, but on the indie crowd, he's probably the most famous stand-up. And we can argue once we get past mainstream, going to indie mainstream and indie, we can argue this is where the talent still is, because when a singer becomes a superstar and becomes super famous, you could argue their music isn't as good, or they sell out somewhere. So you can argue the indie stuff, and usually the super famous people try and do indie films. They try and go back because they want the Oscar. So this is usually the section around here, the middle bit, where you get your Oscars and you get your praise and you become an indie darling. Indie underground, I've got 9 Inch Nails. Now, I know you could argue 9 Inch Nails are independent and maybe even has little flickers in indie mainstream, maybe even mainstream to some people. But this is the difference. Every single group. So, to me, 9 Inch Nails are kind of my mainstream, but to other people, they're not. But why I'm using indie underground is because they were indie, but they did a lot of things what made them go back underground. I know you can argue that point, but let's just say a few records they would. The people were involved when they went off separately. They did things that were indie, but they made sure they go underground. And underground, I've got Andrew Cotton, who is my all-time favorite filmmaker. I think he's a fabulous, brilliant filmmaker, but his work is never ever going to make it to mainstream. And he isn't known by the indie crowd. The indie crowd don't know him. So I think he's the most talented. So this is the most interesting thing about Famous, why I want to make this video. I think he's the most talented as the underground, but he's always probably going to be, at the very most, he could become indie over time. And maybe, because you think about it, David Lynch is a underground to indie filmmaker, but because he is so well known as being that, he's kind of mainstream. So this is a really interesting sliding scale. So if we look at the sort of type of fame you can get, here we have LF. Now, everybody, well, the majority of people have some type of fame. Unless you really are just somebody who gets your head down and is not interested in social media, which I would say is a big, big majority of people. If you are in that category, then there probably is no fame, but you still have some level of status. So you might have some level of status down your street, and to your friend group, to your if you've got 3 friends in life, you have some level of status and fame to them. So everybody has a slight dose of status and fame, but not everybody. But most people do have local fame, but not everybody has local fame. That's the word salad there. So local fame is somebody who has 18,000 followers on Instagram, has, since they've been a child, has always they've never done anything where they've maybe got into a newspaper, they've maybe been on somebody's album, they've maybe done some music somewhere, they've done something, but they have never really made a career off of it, but they're always remembered in community, they're always thought about in communities. Local fame, I think that's all of us in a way. I think we're all kind of infamous amongst one another. So UIF, remember what this one is. UIF is underground to indie fame. So this is again connected to these. So this is people they've done an album where it's got indie success. So these are your cult classic films. These are, you won't recognize these people in the street, but a certain type of person will recognize them. Then we've got I, and then TV, and F. I know this one. This is internet and TV fame. So these are people what have made it on the internet, and at the moment, they get a lot of money, they get a lot of deals, they get all these nice houses, they get all this nice accommodation. So they're extremely famous on the internet, but not necessarily famous to the mainstream, but they're extremely famous to groups on the internet. And then you have TV fame again. You can call them Z-list celebrities if you want. Celebrities what have made it, and they're actively working on TV, but they're just for TV, and you maybe not even remember their names, and they're only kind of regional, they're only to do with the country, and they're kind of referencing old TV shows, and the names are synonymous amongst us, but we don't really remember them. And we've got FF, which is, I've called this one fame. So fame is people who are in the mainstream fame. They are famous, they're going to be famous for life, they've done something where they're always going to be that household name. So that's the peak of fame. That's your Tom Cruise. That's where they go. And obviously your indie main can also go into fame, etc. Now this sun in the middle, the most interesting thing of this diagram is infamy, which is what connects all these. Because to do anything famous, you have to do something, and that could be anything. It could be a serial killer. It could be, I don't know why I said that with so much excitement. It could be, you got a viral video where you skateboarded down a hill and jumped off and did a parachute. Maybe nobody remember your name, but you've done something to create infamy. So everybody is doing something to create infamy. These are levels of fame. It doesn't matter what it is you're doing. We are all on the other side of the camera, on this side of the camera, even what I'm doing now. It is all a technique and a way to make fame. And I know that goes into sort of like stoner philosophy, if you want, like everything is everything and nothing is nothing, but it's just the truth. It's just the way it is. There's just different levels to the game. And the thing what I find most interesting is so I obviously, everybody kind of in a way has some kind of respect for the super famous people, but the people what really matter to me are usually underground to indie to sometimes indie main. It's like this section here are people I actually probably do care about. Like when Norm Macdonald died, I actually cried. I've never cried over a celebrity. I'll never cry over any of the super famous people because they're too far gone from me. But I felt like I knew Norm. I felt like he was doing something interesting, and I felt like he got into. So there is a way where celebrity kind of breaks, and you do generally do feel something. But that's also just my personal taste and personal opinion. But the majority of people, they might know a few indie bands and they might listen to a few by accident, but they're not chasing this. But some people chase up to here and stay here. They just stay at that indie level. They don't go any further. But we could dissect this whole map in so many different ways. It's a very interesting thing. Fame is a very interesting thing. It's only going to get worse because the internet keeps going, and people are getting more sicker, and mental health is getting worse, and people are diagnosing themselves with things, but they're not doing anything about it, and we're getting more and more lonely. And this is one of the big reasons why that is happening. So I hope this video could be insightful. I know on the internet that when you make a video, when I listen to a video, you know what I'm talking about, but it's just when somebody talks about it, it just refreshes in your mind. You go, oh yeah, I remember that. My headphones are getting wet. I remember that subject, or oh yeah, that person's shed light on something what I didn't know how to put into words. So it's a little different video format because I don't usually bring props. I don't usually plan, but I think it's a good way to get a message across, because sometimes on this channel I struggle to condense what I'm saying. I just ramble on. Okay, I'll walk around, listen to some music. I'm gonna enjoy the morning. Go back, get some hot chocolate. I hope you're all good. I hope whatever you're doing, it works out. I always say, if this is the only video of mine you watch, enjoy your life. I sincerely do mean that. Okay, ciao.